Good morning, everyone. Am I audible? Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you, sir. So I am here to introduce today's guest speaker, who is Miss Shweta Chawla, who is Shweta Chawla, ma'am, who is an entrepreneur who has like digital forensic investigator. She's the head and chief investigator of SC Cyber Solution. That is the again, along with that, she is the founder of Association of Women in Information Security, that is AVSEC. She just initiated this AVSAC just to encourage more and more women to come into this field, to come and learn about the digital forensics. So, ma'am definitely have basically done the masters in history, but since she realized that she's interested into digital forensics, so then she started accordingly, and thus then she got into digital forensic investigations, and thus she was ready with it. SC Cyber Solutions and Evisec. So here I am glad to have you, like on behalf of all the staff and students, ma'am. We are glad to have you here, and I hope that yes, students will definitely benefit from this lecture. Thank you, ma'am. Over to you.
Thank you, Payal, ma'am. All right, let me share my screen. Okay, visible?
Yes, ma'am. It's visible.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we've discussed to some extent what goes into establishing security. We've looked at individual security with devices, the kinds of permissions for apps that you install, the kinds of security that you would put into place on your personal accounts, those kinds of things we've discussed. We've also discussed to a certain extent the kinds of security devices that we put into place with uh, firewalls, intrusion detection systems, intrusion prevention systems, honeypots, those kinds of things. And we've spoken about your basic problems with setting up security. But what we've not spoken about is two things. One, that security and particularly cyberspace is an extremely contested domain. Everyone has a stake in it. Everyone has, or at least everyone would like ownership of certain aspects of it. But the fact is that we don't really know who owns cyberspace in the literal sense. And we also don't know what happens to information. So, if any of y'all are following the issues going on and being discussed in America right now, you'll realize that there are a lot of concerns with the way information is being shared and what it is going to be used for. There are data brokers who exist across the world. Their only job is to collect data from various things and sell them to advertising agencies. So these things could be games you played, these could be locations you've visited, feedbacks that you have given, reviews, maybe if you've downloaded a specific app, visited a specific website. These are the kinds of things that they collect information on, build a structure, a profile more accurately of each individual, and this data is sold with the basic purpose, like I said, being advertising. Of course, as the data is sold, it can be bought for multiple other purposes. But that is how you also get ads that are fairly customized to what you like and what you don't like. So I don't know if you've noticed this, but if y'all are playing games, two people are playing games side by side, and this is a game that gets advertisements within it, you'll realize that the advertisements that you get and your friend get are different. They are more oriented towards you as an individual, what sites you have visited, what things you've looked at, maybe something you've spoken about. These are things that will come up. I'll give you an example. A few months ago, I was working with a client on some of their security stuff. And I had never actually heard of this company before they approached me for cybersecurity consultancy. And we did the work with them. Soon enough, maybe 4, 5, 6 days later, every time I played a game on one of my other devices, the ads for this particular company would come up. I had never received ads for this company before. In fact, it is not something I shop for. It is not something anyone in my family shops for. It is not something that I had ever visited prior to the company approaching me. So it was most interesting that this kind of data was available. It's also very scary that this kind of data is available, but that is unfortunately the reality of our times. So, where I'm coming from is first, what is cyberspace? Cyberspace is not physical. It's not something that is bounded by geography. It is not uh, 3 degrees north of the equator to 4 degrees east of the Himalayas. That's not how it works. Cyberspace is not a physically bound area, but it is something that exists effectively in the minds of the people who use it. So when we say we inhabit cyberspace, it is more that we are people who use the internet, use the applications, use the technologies, have presences on multiple social media platforms, have cloud accounts, those kinds of things. We are part of cyberspace. Within cyberspace, of course, again, uh, okay, somebody is not able to hear me. Is everyone else able to?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Okay,
I
perfect.
think the
So,
problem is at his end.
TK, not a problem at all then. Thank you. So when we are looking at cyberspace, remember it's a fascinating environment because a lot of us get into cyberspace to get away from the problems of the physical world. What actually ends up happening is we take the problems of the physical world with us into cyberspace. So it's not like cyberspace is a new, clean, sanitized environment where there are no dangers, which is where the whole purpose of cybersecurity comes from. But the greatest commodity on cyberspace, and because of the proliferation of greatest commodity in the world today, is information. And information is something that has a life of its own. You know how gossip works, right? You tell one person, and you, particularly if you tell that person it's in confidence, within an hour it's spread to 5 other people. And of course, from there it spread like wildfire. So when we do talk about information, uh, there is one logic that says, and this is the same person in the same article who has put both comments, Stuart Brand, who says that information wants to be free. And the whole logic of that is information is so freely available. What is the problem with getting information? You feed somebody an app, you tell them, please download this app, uh, and the person is going to download the app. Next thing you know, you've got full control of their device. It's as simple as that. Give them a game, give them a loan, send them a picture, send them an app that's going to do something they want, and you're absolutely sorted out. In exactly the same way, information is extremely expensive. Not because it's so difficult to get access to, not because it's so difficult to spread, but because this information is so valuable. This valuable information needs to be in some way protected. And what I'm trying to tell you through all of this is probably the logic behind why cybersecurity is such an expensive area. The economics of cybersecurity is something that is still not studied enough, but putting it into place is expensive. not because the technology itself is always expensive, a lot of it is, but because cybersecurity is constantly re-evaluated. And while re-evaluating it, we need to make sure that it meets certain standards. Those standards change over time. And your requirement of security might be very different from the person sitting next to you. When information leaks, the damage that leaked information causes is much, much more than what is visible. A lot of leaked information leads to psychological concerns. Sometimes leaked information leads to suicidal attempts, some successful. It doesn't matter whether the attack against you seems large or minor. The effects of a cybercrime are very far reaching. Let's give you an example. One of the major concerns that we have today in cybersecurity is something called revenge pornography. And revenge pornography is where you have, as an individual, shared either pictures or videos of uh, a slightly sexual nature with your partner. These videos have, once the relationship has soured, been leaked by your partner to some social media platform or have been circulated on WhatsApp or have been uploaded onto Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, many, many other platforms. And this is so you pull the video down the first time. Somebody has liked the video, somebody has seen the video, they've downloaded it as well. And after the while, they upload it. It's an ongoing trauma for the victim. Once something is on the internet, we know it doesn't get erased entirely. It is something that will leave traces behind somewhere or the other. We know of victims of revenge porn who have suffered 8, 10 years after the activity, after the first instance of the data being put up. And that's what makes information so valuable. Without realizing it, all of us are extremely casual with the information that we have. It is easy for us to circulate, it is easy for us to put up. But given that this information needs some kind of control, where does this control come from? At one level, yes, the individual. But at a much larger level, the internet itself has multiple governing bodies. But the fact is, if we are looking at who runs the internet, have you ever considered who runs the internet? And I don't mean who runs Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or Snapchat, who runs Google. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about individual entities. I'm talking about the backbone of the internet, the entire structure that exists that makes it possible for these companies to function. Ever thought of it? Extremely unlikely. Those are the bodies that run it. That's a whole lot of bodies, and it's still not an exhaustive list. Let's simplify it. Let's use this example. When we talk about the internet itself, we've got computers, we've got networks, we've got the internet. The device that you are currently connecting with, let's say it's your cell phone. Do you own the cell phone or do you control the cell phone, or is it both? In the case of your cell phone, it is both. You own it. I've also given examples. So in this case, it's an Oppo cell phone. You own it. You've bought it. You've got control of that device. So you have both ownership and control of it. You've you're using a data plan. You've bought that data plan. In this case, do you have control of that data plan? To a large extent, yes. How do you use it? What are you going to use it for? How quickly are you going to exhaust it? Are you going to preserve it? Those kinds of things. But the data plan that you have got is also controlled by the service provider. They give you the option of whether rollover is possible. If you have used the data plan to a certain extent, maybe they give you additional features. Very often, those are features to entice you, but still, it exists. For this data plan to function, which you have now bought, but you are still not an owner of, for this data plan to function, two things are required. One is bandwidth, two is cell phone towers. If the cell phone towers don't exist, then there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. The cell phone towers belong to the service provider. They are bought, they are controlled by the service provider. But the structure where the cell phone tower exists is borrowed by the service provider. It's leased. You see all of these buildings with cell phone towers on them. The building doesn't belong to your service provider. The building belongs to the person the building belongs to. They've leased the space to the service provider so that the towers can be built over there and used. This enables us to get connectivity. But how on earth do they connect? One option is, of course, cables, which don't really work. They use bandwidth. And this bandwidth is based on the spectrums that the government provides. So please note again, the spectrum, which is a bunch of frequencies put together, a range of frequencies put together, is owned by the government. But this ownership is restricted to the physical boundaries of the country. So you have the boundaries of India, and somewhere in the middle of the ocean, these spectrums still exist because it's frequency, it just exists. But it's not controlled by anybody. In the middle of the ocean, these just aren't owned. Come to the continental shelf, come to the continental boundaries of India, and it's owned by India. Go to the continental boundaries of Sri Lanka, and it's owned by Sri Lanka. There will be a small area which is called a buffer zone, which isn't owned by either India or Sri Lanka. But the fun thing is that if you've got ships of Sri Lanka and India that are going to and from each other, in many, many regions, they will use bandwidth of the other country. The spectrum, remember, is owned by the government. It is leased to the service providers. If you remember, there are lots of controversies that exist regarding the spectrums. It's usual, it's very prime property. And so the spectrums are leased by the government to a service provider. The service provider doesn't own it. The service provider then provides you a specific portion of this bandwidth, which will be utilized for maybe for a call, maybe for data plans. Different spectrums will do different activities. Again, where is your ownership in all of this? Nowhere. Where is your control in all of this? Nowhere. All of this is linked together by data. Naturally, because otherwise it's not going to flow. And if there wasn't data, then what on earth are we using these spectrums for? Information needs to pass, right? Whose information? And now comes the question. At which stage in this entire activity do you own your information and control it as well? only in the first stage, only on the device. That is where you have ownership and control. Once it is on the internet, there is no ownership and almost no control. The sites that we use will allow a certain degree of ownership to your data. So, all the social media channels that we have, all the platforms that we use, will provide you with some amount of control of your data. But the interesting thing, and this is one of the reasons why we keep telling people don't put up intellectual property onto social media, is because once something is on social media, the ownership of that is transferred from the user to the platform. So you're a poet, you're looking at publishing a book, and you've put your poetry up on Instagram. A whole bunch of your followers have seen it, have used it, have liked it. Some of them have printed it out, turned it into a poster, put it up somewhere, and have started selling it. Poetry is yours. Do you earn anything from it at this stage? Not at all. So, ownership becomes very, very problematic on the internet, and control is something that is constantly fought for. In most cases, we as individuals don't even think of ownership or control when data is being put up. So, how do we then control these kinds of things? What do we do? Is there absolutely anything we can do? There is. There are a lot of policies, a lot of frameworks that exist that allow us to put things up, put controls in place. You will notice that all companies that are publicly listed will attempt to provide better security, not because that's what they want, but because that is what they know their clients are going to demand. And if it's a publicly listed company, then it is certainly something that they are most concerned with. So we've got things in place which are usually control mechanisms. You'll have governance, you'll have policies, you'll have compliance. The three are not the same. Governance is put up by the governments in control. So the policies that we have for OTT platforms, the policies that we have for intermediaries, those kinds of things are governance. Policies would be put up by the companies themselves, saying we have a cybersecurity policy, we have a password policy, we have a data sharing policy, which are logical mechanisms of saying this is what we will do. If we have a password policy, we are going to change our passwords every a minimum of every 3 months. Our passwords are going to meet these parameters. If they don't, they will not be permitted as passwords. Those kinds of things, those get into policies. Compliance checks that these kinds of things are actually put into place. So if my policy says that I'm going to change my password every 6 months, what controls do I have to make sure that the policy is changed every 6 months? Users can naturally not be depended on to change policies. 6 months come and go before we know it. We are already in May, and 2022 is almost over, or at least almost halfway over, and it's not something that uh, has taken very long. So 6 months go by before you know it sometimes. Otherwise, 6 months can be very, very long. So Einstein's relativity principle works very well. To ensure that all of these things exist, we have what is called offensive security and defensive security. Defensive security is what we have done the last 3 semesters, or what we should have been able to do the last 3 semesters, where we learn how to protect ourselves in multiple ways from all of the dangers that exist online. Offensive security is where we start attacking the systems to see how safe they are. Break into them, figure out how they were broken into, Figure out a way to safeguard against such breakages. That's offensive security. Okay, why won't the screen change? So I'm not going to go into this, but how does governance work? What are we doing? It's a round and round and round the mulberry bush kind of a process. We never finish it. So let's say we start off with policies. We've got policies in place, and we've decided these are what we are going to do. The first thing you do after you've got your policies in place is go and announce that these are our policies. All employees, all family members. Sorry, somebody has something to say? I guess not. Okay. So we'll give you an example. You've got your house and you've suddenly decided that you're going to start eating meals at 8 in the evening. Everyone is going to be at the dining table at 8 in the evening. No cell phones permitted at the dining table. No laptops permitted. No classes permitted. No TV permitted. That's the policy that has been created by the house. Most likely, this is the policy created by the mother of the house. So, everyone is informed of this policy. This is the policy from this evening onwards. This is how the policy is going to work. Anyone found with a cell phone on the table is going to be punished in a certain manner that is also listed out. Now, this is put into place. So, everyone sits down to dinner, no cell phones, no TV, no laptop, no nothing. Okay. This is monitored and this is evaluated for about a week, 10 days, 15 days, a month. It works fine, but you realize that one of the people in the house has to work overtime now and is not going to be able to be there for dinner at 8 o'clock. This person is now going to turn up at 8:30. So the whole thing is reevaluated, reassessed, and it is found that 8 o'clock is an inconvenient meal time. It's shifted to 8:30. What happens here? 8:30, people say, okay, 8:30 we eat. Hmm, we sleep late, we have digestion issues, etc., etc. But you realize 8:30 still works. Anything later than 8:30 would be problematic. So you go back, you implement a policy change, and you start off with the whole thing again. The same thing is what we do in cybersecurity all the time. This is an ongoing process that is carried out on an effectively daily basis. So, if you were to build a cybersecurity policy for your house, this is what you would need to do: build your policy, system usage, system controls, what devices are going to be permitted, how long you're going to use them for, things of the kind. Put those into place, announce it, maybe print it out, put it up as a notice at home. Those kinds of things can be carried out. Monitor, evaluate, see that these policies are actually carried out. If not, the appropriate punishments are given, and figure out what next needs to be done. Like I said, absolutely non-stop ongoing process. To this, what we are going to calculate and why we are going to do this is because we have risks. What are the risks that we experience? What are the risks that we are thinking about? Is data loss a risk? Is access control a risk? Are we concerned that somebody is going to be stealing intellectual property? Are we concerned that somebody is going to be monitoring our house? Is there a stalker around? So, depending on what the concerns are, what the risks exist, controls would be put into place to take care of these risks. Now, controls are typically of three kinds, or not. Again, why won't the screen change? Wake up, system. Okay. So we have three kinds of controls: administrative, which means orders come down from the managing body; technical controls that we are putting into place. So what is going to happen if a password does not change? If the password does not change, who is responsible? And physical controls like access: who can enter your house, who will be permitted, is somebody permitted to enter your house at 2 in the morning? So have you ever had the situation where doorbell rings at 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning? You don't know who is going to open the door, because you really don't want to go and open the door at 3 in the morning to see who is there. What if this is somebody who is dangerous? How are you going to respond? At 3 in the morning, you don't really have the thought process to think of these things out. So, is this something that has been discussed in the house? Is this something that you have thought of? These are the kinds of policy controls that are good to think about. What are the risks that you face? What are the dangers that exist? So, when you're looking at these, when you're looking at cybersecurity, think of these kinds of things. What are the dangers that can exist? Look at older histories. Uh, have there been thefts in the area? Have there been people who have been breaking into houses? Have vehicles been damaged? Has somebody sent ransomware to a similar organization? Is malware one of our concerns? We've got employees who are working from home. What is the possibility that somebody in the house is going to use the office machine for something else? What is the possibility that somebody is going to plug in an infected pen drive into an office computer? Those are the kinds of things that you look at and you think about. It, of course, requires a lot of research and understanding, because some amount of controls you can think of on your own, some amount of controls you learn because somebody else has had this problem. Some amount of concerns will be because I am being absolutely paranoid, and I assume that it is going to be there. All of these things need to be thought about. Once you have thought about it, you start figuring out the probability of the risk actually materializing into a threat. How likely is it that this is actually going to happen? And if it is likely that it is going to happen, then of course you need to take better security measures. If it is something that you feel might not happen at all, let's say we are talking about a volcanic eruption here in Pune. Now, all companies who have data, one of the major concerns that they have is what is called business continuity and planning. If their data gets damaged, is it going to shut down their business? In all likelihood, yes. If it is going to shut down their business, what precautions do they take to make sure that if data is damaged, they can get up and operational again in a few hours, maybe a day, maybe 4 days, maybe a week? How does that happen? What do they put into place? So, one of the things that are constantly looked for is also physical disasters: volcanoes, earthquakes, cyclones, hurricanes, tornadoes, those kinds of things. For Pune, we don't have volcanoes around here. Earthquakes, yes, that is something that we need to look at in Pune. But a volcanic eruption is something that is not part of Pune's BCP planning. Floods, yes, again, something we need to think about. Cyclones, hurricanes, not really, because they don't find their way here thanks to the mountains around. When you're looking at these kinds of security measures, these are also contingencies that we are planning for. All of these, unfortunately, are expensive. Look at your earlier things, look at the plans, look at what you have, and then comes the biggest problem. How do you align it to finances? So, one of the things that we do have today is cybersecurity insurance. And this is something that exists for individuals. So, you have cyber insurance for an individual, you have cyber insurance for a company. Suppose your data is lost. As say, you have a Google Drive account and the data has just disappeared off your Google Drive. Do you have an insurance policy that will help you because that data was valuable to you? This is something that the insurance policies provide. For the company, what if you have a cyber attack? What if you have an employee who has stolen your laptop and gone away? What if you have the same employee has stolen your laptop, gone away, sold the data from that laptop to a rival company? What if you have full blown corporate espionage where they've broken through your systems and are spying? What if you have a malware attack? What if you have a ransomware attack? What if you have a physical disaster, your building burns down, and all your data centers burn with it? These are all things that you think about when looking at an insurance policy. So, do you pay the premiums for an insurance policy? Do you not? It is the equivalent of getting a life insurance policy for every individual. Should you have a life insurance policy? Should you have a medical health policy? Medical insurance policy? Should you think about it? I might never need it because I might never have a hospitalization. But should I have a policy? Maybe, maybe not. Do I want to pay the premiums on it? So cybersecurity is actually a lot like that. What about a product telling me, hey, hey, buy my product, because if you buy my product, I'm going to give you one, two, three, four, five things. I don't need those one, two, three, four, five things. But because he's telling me he's going to give me these one, two, three, four, five things packaged with my product, I think, is it worth it? Is it something I want to buy? Yes, yes, because it's cheaper. It might not be what we need for security. It might be opening up multiple loopholes. So, have you ever noticed that you've downloaded an application and in the application there's a small little option that comes, download something else with it. So, okay, you've downloaded a PDF printer, and along with the PDF printer, it gives you the option of downloading a browser plugin as a search engine. And you've not noticed it, you've said yes, and the next thing you know is instead of your search being Google or Pay or Bing or DuckDuckGo, you're suddenly using some absolutely strange search engine. That's a free product. It came. You didn't ask for it, but nor did you pay attention to what you were downloading. So it came along. These kinds of dangers exist with free stuff. Is the technology available? Is the technology a good idea? Something like your devices that are listening to you all the time, like you've got uh, one of your IoT devices, Amazon Echo, those kinds of things. Uh, they're listening. You say, hi, play me a song. It's going to play you a song. Hi, tell me a joke. It's going to tell you a joke. Did you want it? I mean, is this keeping you company? Is this actually helping you in any way? Was it so difficult to type out, find me a song on your device? Why did you take it? Because everybody else did? Because somebody gifted it to you as a Diwali gift? Which is actually some of the things that we've seen. We've had Diwali gifts being given to companies which actually contain listening devices. In certain cases, video cameras. We had a case quite some time ago where this company kept grumbling that everything they planned was uh, known to the rival company. So they started these plannings in a room which was absolutely bare of uh, digital devices. So nobody took their cell phones in, nobody did anything of the kind. And then the question was things discussed there were still known by the rival. And so obviously now the board started suspecting each other because they were the only people who knew what was happening. And so we carried out an investigation. We checked. We found that we looked for listening devices in that room. And we actually found that they had been given this very, very pretty clock. It was a very nice looking clock that they were given. And this clock was fixed in the conference room, uh, nice up on the wall. This clock had both a camera and a mic in it. And everything that was spoken in that room would be broadcast to a certain device, a certain receiver. This receiver would broadcast it out and was picked up from the company's parking lot in by people sitting in a car. Every bit of conversation was overheard. So there wasn't anyone internally who was leaking the data, but there was something internally that was leaking the data. So those are things that need to be looked for. Is it expensive? Is it something I can afford? Is it a device that is being manufactured and controlled in a foreign country, an enemy country? In that case, is that really something that we want? Like most countries across the world have objected to a certain kind of a router being utilized. If it belongs to a particular company, no government office is permitted to use it. There is also the problem that most government offices across the world have this policy that says use the devices provided for the cheapest cost. And this device is invariably at cheapest cost. So you have two policies that are conflicting with each other, but those are concerns that exist as well. Where am I getting these devices from? Are they going to be imported? Are they devices that exist in India or in your geography? Is this something that needs to be manufactured specifically for you? Uh, is it to be customized? What are we looking at? What are the privacy requirements that we are thinking of? How secure do we want these to be? A lot of us use VPNs. And while using VPNs, many of us prefer to use a free VPN. Again, why spend for it? What we don't realize is most free VPNs still need some way to run their business. And that way to run their business is to turn themselves into data brokers. So they are going to be selling the data that passes through the VPN. They might then be maintaining further records, which can then track back to you. So, depending on what levels of security we are looking at, depending on what kind of data we are looking at, we put measures into place. Okay. Uh, Sagar sir, can we stop 5 minutes early and take a break now?
Yes, ma'am, will do.
Chalega, because then I'll be switching topics, so it might be easier to do it right now.
Yes, ma'am, no problem.
Okay. All right. We'll take a 5 minute break then.
Yes.